Just before sunrise, at a wildlife rescue in Arizona, Jack Miller stepped into the mist and froze. An adult elephant was hugging a baby zebra like it was her own. But the foal was barely breathing, its legs slick with blood, and without help, it would be dead before the sun cleared the ridge. The problem was simple and terrifying. One wrong step, and that mother could turn lethal. Then Jack spotted something in the mud, and what he found shattered him. Before sunrise, Canyon Ridge Wildlife Refuge felt like it was holding its breath. A thin Arizona fog drifted low across mesquite and salt grass, turning the floodlights into pale halos. Jack Miller walked the perimeter with a thermos and a crackling radio, listening for anything out of place. Far off, a lone saguaro cut a black line into the gray air. He liked the quiet usually. At 61, Jack moved slower, but his focus never softened. 27 years of rescue work taught him to notice what didn't belong. A latch turned. Wrong. Fresh tire marks on the service road. A gate that didn't settle into its groove. Most mornings, the elephants greeted him first, with warm rumbles that traveled through the fence like a heartbeat. Today, there was no greeting. Daisy's yard sat strangely still, the trough untouched, the sand unscuffed by her usual pacing. Jack stopped at the fence and stared into the haze until his eyes adjusted. Daisy stood near the dry pond bed like a monument, her body angled outward as if she were guarding the horizon, as if she'd decided the world didn't get closer. Jack raised his binoculars, expecting a coyote or a stray dog skulking near the waterline. Instead, he saw something small pressed against Daisy's front legs, too narrow to be an elephant calf, too fragile to be there at all. It shivered, then let out a thin, wavering sound that cut through the fog. It wasn't a call. It was a cry, pleading and exhausted. He stepped inside on instinct, boots darkening with dew, then forced himself to slow. Daisy had been chained for traveling shows before Jack ever met her, and that history lived under her skin like old bruises. He'd earned her trust in inches, not leaps. Calm voice, steady hands, no sudden angles. One wrong move now could turn protection into panic, and panic into tragedy. As he closed the distance, the fog thinned and the shape became stripes. Jack's brain rejected it for a beat, like it was refusing to accept the impossible. A baby zebra lay smeared with mud, ribs faint under a dull coat, tucked into the shelter of an Asian elephant's legs as if it had always belonged there. Jack tasted metal in his mouth, the way he did when reality shifted. Daisy's trunk moved with careful tenderness. She brushed the foal's back in slow strokes, then curled the tip around its shoulder, the way elephant mothers do when they count breaths and check heat. The zebra leaned into it, trembling harder, and Jack felt his throat tighten. He'd seen animals adopt odd comforts before, but this looked like motherhood, not confusion. The foal tried to stand and failed, knees wobbling like wet reeds. A low rumble rolled from Daisy's chest, deeper than sound, more like a warning the ground could feel. She shifted an inch to make a warmer pocket of shadow, then nudged the foal's neck until it settled. The cry broke and returned in fragments, the sound of a body running out of strength, and Jack heard a clock start ticking. Gravel crunched behind Jack, too loud in the hush. Noah Briggs, the new volunteer, hovered near the gate with curiosity stamped across his face. Jack lifted one hand without turning, a silent stop sign, and Noah froze mid-step. Daisy's ears angled slightly, catching everything. The foal cried again, and Daisy squared her stance, shielding it with her chest. Jack's eyes dropped to the foal's hind leg, and his stomach fell with them. The left fetlock was swollen and raw, the hair gone in angry patches, and the dark sheen clinging to it wasn't just mud. Even from here he could smell it, sweet and wrong, the stink of infection that spreads fast in desert heat. The zebra's breaths came in short, uneven catches, each one thinner than the last. A memory Jack didn't invite rose up anyway. Daisy 6 months ago, standing over a small, still shape in fresh straw, her trunk nudging as if persistence could rewrite reality. The staff had done everything medicine could do, then stood there empty-handed. Since then, Daisy carried the loss like a stone, wandering to water at odd hours. Watching her now, Jack realized she'd found a place to put it. Now Daisy wasn't staring past Jack. She was staring straight through him, dark eyes steady, not wild, not pleading measuring. Near her foot something glinted under wet sand, a small loop of metal half buried, catching the first pale edge of dawn like a secret. Jack set his thermos down, kept his palms open, and spoke softly. "Easy, Daisy. I'm here." Then he took one careful step closer and waited. Before sunrise, Canyon Ridge Wildlife Refuge felt like it was holding its breath. Jack Miller stood just inside Daisy's fence line, with his palms low and open, as if lowering the air itself. Fog smelled like damp sand and creosote. Daisy didn't blink. Her trunk stayed draped over the tiny striped body, and the foal's thin cries made Jack's chest tighten, then go hollow. Behind him, Noah shifted his weight, too new to understand how loud fear could be. Jack didn't turn. "Stay right there," he murmured, the same steady tone he used when a horse balked or a volunteer panicked. The radio on Jack's belt hissed once with a dispatcher's check-in. He clicked it off before the sound could carry, then listened to the quiet settle again. Noah nodded too fast, and that was the problem. Drawn by the crying, he took one small step anyway. Gravel popped under his boot like a firecracker in the mist. Daisy's head lifted a fraction. Her ears spread wide, making her look even larger, and the rumble in her throat deepened from warning into something final, as if the ground had chosen a side. Jack raised his hand again, firmer now, and Noah froze mid-breath. Daisy shifted her front foot closer to the foal without touching it, the way a mother blocks a threat without striking. The foal tried to crawl deeper into her shadow, and failed, legs trembling like wet reeds. Jack saw the swollen hind joint, and the dark, wet streak below it, and his mind started counting minutes. He wanted to rush in. 30 seconds of pressure, a clean wrap, antibiotics, simple on paper, life-saving in real life. But Daisy wasn't paper. She was 4 tons of muscle and memory, an animal once punished for flinching. Jack had seen what fear did to an elephant. Tenderness turned to a wall, and a wall turned to a weapon before anyone could blink. Jack backed one step, slow enough to feel foolish, and spoke to Daisy like he was reading a bedtime story in a dark room. "You're okay. I see her. I'm not taking her." The words weren't magic, but rhythm mattered. Daisy's trunk brushed the foal's neck, gentle as breath. The foal's cry softened to a ragged whimper, then returned smaller, like it was trying not to bother anyone. Jack motioned Noah toward the gate and mouthed, "Quiet." Noah's fingers fumbled on the latch, metal scraping metal. Daisy's trunk snapped up, and her body angled forward. For one terrifying second Jack thought she'd charge. The air tightened. The sand under his boots felt suddenly unstable. Jack swallowed hard and held his hands where Daisy could see them. "Easy," Jack said, louder than he meant, then lowered his voice immediately. He stepped between Noah and Daisy, not as a shield because he knew better, but as a statement of intent. Daisy's eyes stayed locked on him, steady and dark, not wild but absolute. The foal coughed, a wet little choke that sounded wrong. Jack felt urgency, spike-like pain behind his ribs, and he forced his face to stay calm. He thumbed his phone with hands that didn't feel like his, and called Dr. Megan Carter before the first ring finished. "Megan, it's Jack. I need you in Daisy's yard, right now." He kept his eyes on Daisy as he spoke, the way you watch a storm line you can't outrun. He didn't say the part he was thinking. The foal was fading while they stood there talking. Megan's voice came sharp through the speaker, awake, already moving. Jack gave her the shortest version. Zebra foal, infected leg, Daisy guarding. "Don't bring a crowd," he warned. "No sirens, no carts. Just you, quiet, and whatever you can carry." When he ended the call, silence returned heavier, and he could hear Noah breathing behind him like a metronome. Minutes dragged. The sky brightened by degrees, and with every pale shift, the foal looked smaller. Daisy pressed her cheek against it, sharing heat the only way she could. Jack watched her breathe, steady and deep, and Something in him hurt with the thought that she'd been practicing this kind of goodbye for months. Noah stood behind Jack, eyes wet, hands clenched to keep them still. Megan arrived without sirens, rolling in on the service road in a dusty pickup that coasted the last yards in neutral. She didn't stride in. She paused, took in Daisy's stance, the foal's tremor, Jack's posture. From the fence line, she whispered, "Hypothermia, dehydration, and that leg. Jack, it looks septic." Her eyes flicked to him, asking a question she didn't want to say out loud. Jack swallowed and nodded, as if agreement could buy time. Megan's gaze tracked the foal's ribs, the dull coat, the way its breath hitched and stalled. "If we don't get fluids in soon, it won't make sunrise," she said. Jack turned back to Daisy and kept his voice low, almost tender. "We're going to help," he promised, more to himself than anyone. "We'll do it slow. We'll do it right." Morning. Light seeped into the fog in thin layers, turning the refuge into a washed-out watercolor. Jack stayed near the fence line with Dr. Megan Carter, both of them speaking in whispers, like they were in a church. Inside the yard, Daisy held her ground by the pond bed, her trunk resting over the small zebra foal, as if it were the last warm thing on earth. Megan laid out what she could on the tailgate of her truck: blankets, a small fluid bag, a few syringes, nothing that clanked. Jack watched her hands, then watched Daisy again, reading every ear flick and breath. The foal's cries had turned into thin, broken sounds, like a radio losing signal. Jack hated how helpless that sounded in the wide desert morning. He sent Noah back for more towels and a quieter flashlight, and he made him repeat the rule twice. No running, no sudden voices, no hero moves. Noah nodded hard, eyes wide, trying to be useful. Jack knew the kid meant well. Good intentions were dangerous in a yard, with a grieving elephant and a dying animal no one could explain. The first engine they heard didn't belong to staff. A dark SUV rolled up the service road, slow at first, then too confident, tires pressing fresh tracks into damp sand. Jack's shoulders tightened before the vehicle even stopped. The driver stepped out in clean boots that hadn't seen mud, and his jacket looked new enough to still smell like a store. "Jack Miller," the man called, loud in the quiet. "Name's Cole Reyes. I'm here for the zebra." He held up a laminated badge, like it was a shield, then glanced past Jack toward Daisy's yard with a businessman's impatience. Jack felt Megan go still beside him. Inside the fence, Daisy's ears angled, catching the sharpness in the man's voice. Jack kept his face calm, even as his stomach dropped. "Not here," he said, low and firm. "Lower your voice. That elephant's guarding the foal." Cole frowned, as if the word guarding offended him. "It's property," Cole replied. "Private animal. It wandered. I'm contracted to retrieve it. Hand it over, and we're done." Jack shook his head once, slow. "It's hurt. It might not last the hour." He didn't add the other truth. Nobody was handing over anything, while Daisy stood there like a wall. Cole stepped closer anyway, paperwork already sliding out of a folder. "I don't care about your feelings," Cole said. "I care about liability." Cole's next words came louder, faster, the kind of pressure men used when they thought they could bully a situation into obedience. Daisy answered with a deep, rolling rumble that traveled through the fence posts. Her head lifted, her ears spread wide, her trunk rose in a warning that made the air feel smaller. The zebra foal flinched and tried to crawl, then collapsed again. Jack moved between Cole and the gate without touching him, but close enough to make the boundary clear. "Stop," Jack said, sharp now, then softened instantly. "You take one more step, and you'll get someone killed." Cole's mouth opened for a retort, then hesitated when Daisy shifted her weight, sand puffing beneath her feet like smoke. Cole thrust the paperwork toward Jack, rattling pages on purpose. "You don't have authority," he snapped. "This is a retrieval order. I'll sue this place into dust." Jack glanced at the documents just long enough to see mismatched logos and a signature line that looked too fresh. Something in his gut went cold, the way it did when a story didn't add up. Megan leaned close to Jack's shoulder, voice barely audible. "I need space and time," she whispered. "If he keeps escalating, Daisy won't let us get near the foal at all." Jack nodded without looking away from Cole. He could feel the foal's clock ticking, could feel Daisy listening to every sharp syllable. The wrong kind of human noise could undo everything. Jack pulled his phone out and turned his body, slightly, shielding the screen as if it might offend Daisy. He called Deputy Laura Price, the calmest law in their corner of the county. "Laura," he said when she picked up, "I need you here quiet. No lights, no siren. We've got a man claiming a zebra foal, and we've got an elephant who thinks it's her baby." Cole saw the phone call and scoffed, then lifted his own phone to record. Noah returned from the supply shed, stopped short at the site, and looked to Jack for instructions. Jack gave him a small hand signal. "Stay behind, keep the gate area clear, don't engage." Daisy rumbled again, lower now, a warning wrapped around a plea. Jack made a decision the way he'd made 100 hard ones, fast, and with the weight landing in his chest after. He stepped toward Cole, not challenging him, but guiding him back down the road where the sound wouldn't reach the yard. "Let's talk over there," Jack said, offering calm like a rope. "You get water, you get answers, but you do not push this." For a moment, Cole seemed ready to fight it. Then, the rumble behind the fence convinced him to move. Jack walked him toward the shade of a mesquite, buying minutes the way rescuers sometimes did, one quiet step at a time. When Jack turned back, the fog was thinning, the day waking up, and Daisy was still holding that little striped body close. Jack swallowed hard and promised the morning, "Hold on." Jack kept Cole under the mesquite's shade with nothing but his voice and his body position, the same tools he'd used to calm panicked animals for decades. He didn't argue the paperwork yet. He argued the moment. "If you want that foal alive," Jack said, "you give us quiet." Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing on pride, but he stayed put. Back at the fence, Megan waited with her kit tucked inside a plain canvas bag, anything shiny wrapped in cloth. Noah hovered behind her, hands full of towels, eyes darting to Daisy and back. Jack returned, with measured steps, as if haste itself could spook the air. Daisy watched him approach, trunk lifting to taste his scent, deciding whether he was still the same man. Riley Chen arrived without fanfare, hair pulled back, clipboard left in the truck. She didn't need notes to read what was happening. She studied Daisy's feet, the set of her shoulders, the angle of her ears. "She's not guarding territory," Riley murmured. "She's guarding a baby. That changes everything." Jack felt Megan exhale, like she'd been holding it for an hour. Riley crouched at the fence line and spoke softly, not to Daisy's ears, but to her instincts. "We don't take," she said. "We join." She explained it in simple terms. Daisy had already decided who the foal was. They couldn't rewrite that in a morning. They could only ask permission, the way another elephant would, with patience and offerings and the gentlest kind of confidence. Jack headed to the kitchen shed for Daisy's favorite treats, moving as if he were walking on glass. He returned with slices of watermelon sealed in a quiet container and a bundle of crisp apples. He stopped well short of the yard and set the food down on the sand, then backed away 2 full steps, hands open, palms showing. It was an invitation, not a bribe. Daisy's trunk lifted immediately, curiosity tugging against caution. She didn't leave the foal. She stretched, slow and careful, and pulled a slice of watermelon toward her mouth without shifting her feet. Jack felt his shoulders loosen by a fraction. Food sharing was language in elephant society. It meant, "I see you. I don't fear you enough to refuse." The zebra foal made a small, wet sound and tried to raise its head. Daisy responded by pressing her cheek to it, then sweeping her trunk down its back in a steady rhythm. Jack watched the foal's sides move, shallow and uneven. He could see how close it was to slipping away. The calm was fragile, but it was the only doorway they had. Megan kept her supplies hidden as long as possible, and Jack stayed the face Daisy knew. He spoke in a low, even tone, repeating soft phrases the way he'd repeated them to Daisy in her first months here. "Good girl. It's okay. I'm right here." He let his words carry the steadiness his hands couldn't yet offer. Noah shifted behind them, and Jack shot him a look that said freeze. Noah held still, swallowing hard. Riley eased closer to Megan and whispered, "No sudden reaches. Let Daisy investigate first. If she touches your hands, she's collecting information." Megan nodded, eyes on Daisy, the way a diver watches the water before stepping in. Jack made the next move, as if he were negotiating with a storm. He brought Megan's canvas bag into view, not raised, just resting near his knee. Daisy's ears flicked forward, not spread wide. Her trunk extended, tip opening like a careful hand, and she reached through the air toward the bag. Jack didn't flinch. He let her touch it, smell it, decide what it was. For a long minute, Daisy explored the bag, then traced Megan's wrist with the lightest pressure. Megan kept her breathing slow and visible, shoulders down, hands relaxed. Jack watched Daisy's eyes, dark, focused, searching for the smallest sign of threat. The foal coughed again, and Daisy's trunk snapped back to check it, as if reminding everyone who mattered most. Megan took one small step, then stopped. Daisy shifted, sand whispering under her feet. Jack's heart jumped, but Daisy didn't surge forward. Instead, she angled her body slightly, still shielding the foal, but opening a narrow gap, a sliver of access. It wasn't trust. It was a decision made under pressure. Help, but watch. Megan knelt at the edge of that gap, hands moving slow enough to be almost ceremonial. Jack stayed close, voice steady, ready to pull her back if Daisy changed her mind. Riley stood behind them like a quiet anchor. The foal's eyes, fluttered, tired and glassy, and Megan reached toward its injured leg for the first time. Daisy's trunk hovered over Megan's hands, not striking, just monitoring, an enormous mother inspecting a stranger's touch. Jack held his breath until his lungs hurt, then let it go in a thin stream. The fog was almost gone now, replaced by pale desert light, and in that light Jack saw something he hadn't expected. Daisy wasn't fighting them. She was allowing them, and that felt like a miracle with teeth. Megan stayed on her knees in the sand, moving like she was afraid to crack the spell of the morning. Jack stood just behind her shoulder, close enough to pull her back, far enough to let Daisy feel like she was choosing this. The fog thinned in slow ribbons. The foal's ribs fluttered under its coat with each shallow breath, and Daisy's trunk hovered above it like a watchful hand. Daisy kept her head low, eyes locked on Megan's fingers as they neared the swollen leg. When the veterinarian paused, Daisy paused too, as if the elephant had to approve every second. Jack spoke in soft, even tones, not commands, more like a lullaby. He'd learned a mother elephant, read posture, like language, and even old chain scars couldn't dull that instinct. Megan eased a folded towel beneath the foal's chest to lift it an inch off the cold sand. The little zebra trembled, then sagged, too exhausted to fight. Daisy shifted her massive shoulder closer to block the breeze, sheltering the foal in a warmer pocket of air. Jack watched that protective move and felt tenderness rise, even as urgency kept tightening. Up close, the wound looked worse. Raw skin, heat, swelling, and a sweet, rotten smell that made Megan's jaw set. She didn't say the word, but Jack knew it. Infection that didn't wait for daylight. The foal tried to kick and couldn't. Daisy rumbled once, low and steady, warning the world while trying to calm the baby at her feet, and Jack silently counted. Breaths, like they were coins. Megan reached for a thermometer and stopped halfway, rethinking the shape of her hands. She swapped tools, choosing whatever looked least threatening, and Jack realized how much this wasn't normal medicine. Daisy's trunk brushed Megan's wrist again, firm but not hostile, testing the intent behind every motion. Jack gave a tiny nod. "Let her check you. Don't rush it." Beyond the yard, Jack caught a glimpse of Cole lingering under the mesquite, phone raised, impatience written in his stance. Jack refused to give him attention. He kept his shoulders loose and his feet planted, knowing Daisy noticed tension the way dogs noticed fear. The foal's breathing hitched, then steadied for 2 fragile beats, as if borrowing time from the morning. Megan whispered, "I need a quick look at its gums." Jack angled his body so Daisy could see the motion before it happened, the way another elephant might signal a change. Megan slid 2 fingers toward the foal's mouth, slow as tidewater. Daisy's ears lifted, then settled. The foal's mouth was dry as paper, and Jack felt the quiet confirmation. It was slipping. Jack crouched to hand Megan another towel, and his knee sank into wet sand near Daisy's front foot, close enough to see the cracked lines in her toenails. Something hard tapped his kneecap, small and metallic. For a second he thought it was fence hardware, but the glint was too clean, too deliberate. He brushed away mud with 2 fingertips, and felt a thin loop slide free, cold against his skin. It was a little bracelet, the kind a refuge used for keepsakes, caked with grit and algae. Jack turned it in his palm, and the letters caught the growing light like a blade. Hope. Beneath it, a date. 03/14. The air left his lungs so fast it hurt. His hands went numb, and the yard seemed to tilt, as if the world had shifted a half-inch out of place. 6 months ago, Daisy had labored through the night in a straw-lined stall while Jack sat on the floor outside, listening to every strained breath. The calf arrived slick and small, and Daisy wrapped herself around it the same way she was doing now. Jack remembered her trunk touching the newborn's face, counting life like beads. On the 3rd morning, the calf stopped moving anyway. Jack's phone buzzed with a calendar alert. September 14th. He stared at the date, and the meaning landed with cruel clarity. Today was 6 months to the day, an invisible milestone Daisy had been carrying in her body. She hadn't just found a foal. She'd found a way to hold the birthday she never got to celebrate. Jack blinked hard, forcing himself back into the present. Daisy's trunk touched Jack's forearm, gentle but insistent, as if asking what he was holding. Jack closed his fist around the bracelet and lowered his hand where she could smell it. Daisy paused, then rumbled softly, a sound that didn't threaten anyone. Jack tucked the bracelet into his pocket like a sacred thing, turned to Megan and said, "Do what you need to do. I'll keep her with us." As the first clean edge of sun slid over the ridge, the fog began to burn away. Megan unwrapped supplies and cloth to keep them quiet, and Noah stood behind the gate, counting his own breaths. Cole's silhouette still waited under the tree, restless and small at a distance. Jack felt the bracelet's weight and kept his voice low for Daisy. "One step at a time," he whispered. The sun was higher now, but the yard still felt hushed, like everyone was speaking around a sleeping child. Jack stood with one hand resting on the fence rail, the other buried in his pocket, where the little bracelet sat against his knuckles. Daisy's shadow covered the foal. Megan worked from a kneel, unwrapping tools from cloth like they were fragile. Jack watched Daisy more than he watched the medicine. Her eyes tracked Megan's shoulders, her ears flicked at every small sound, and her trunk kept returning to the foal's ribs, as if counting proof of life. Jack kept talking in that low, steady cadence Daisy knew, not promising miracles, just offering rhythm. The foal's breathing stayed thin, but it stayed. Megan leaned closer to the injured leg, and her expression tightened. The wound wasn't a clean bite or a jagged tear. It had a shape that looked deliberate, a narrow groove with rubbed skin around it, like something had cinched and pulled. Jack saw her glance at him, then at Daisy, and choose her words carefully. "This isn't just bad luck," she whispered. A soft crunch of tires came from the service road, slow, no siren, no lights. Deputy Laura Price stepped out of her cruiser like she was entering a chapel, one palm raised in apology to the quiet. Jack met her at the gate and spoke low. "Keep him back," he said, nodding toward Cole under the mesquite. "If he sets Daisy off, we lose everything." Laura's eyes took in the scene in one sweep. Elephant, foal, medic kit, the tension in the air like wire. She nodded once, then walked toward Cole, without swagger, without a hand on her holster. "Morning," she said, calm as dust. "Let's see what you've got." Cole lifted his folder, like a weapon, and started talking fast. Jack stayed half-turned, listening with one ear while keeping Daisy in his sightline. Cole's voice rose with every sentence, as if volume could turn paperwork into truth. Laura didn't match his energy. She asked for IDs, for names, for specifics. Cole's answers stumbled. He kept shifting his weight toward the gate, eyes on the foal like it was an invoice he needed signed. Megan's fingers traced the edge of the wound and found something else. 2 tiny punctures near the swollen skin, too neat to be a thorn. She held up a gloved fingertip with a faint smear and shook her head slightly. "There's residue," she murmured to Jack. "Sedative, maybe. And this mark? It looks like wire. A snare." Jack felt his stomach turn cold. He pictured the foal stumbling through desert scrub, trapped, drugged, dragged, then somehow crawling into Daisy's lonely corner of the refuge. The story didn't feel like nature. It felt like people. Jack's hand closed around the bracelet in his pocket until the metal bit his skin. Daisy rumbled softly, sensing the change in him, and Jack forced his breath to stay even. Cole suddenly pushed off the tree and strode toward the gate, waving a phone and shouting about seizure and the law. Laura stepped in front of him, palm out, voice still quiet, but unmovable. "Sir, you're not going in there," she said. Cole tried to angle around her, frustration flashing hot, and his shoulder bumped the supply table Megan had set near the fence. The table rocked. A wrapped syringe rolled, then a metal clip clinked against a bucket, one sharp, bright sound in a world built on whispers. Daisy's head snapped up, her ears flared wide, and she surged one step, sand exploding under her foot. The foal cried out and tried to scramble, legs slipping. Jack's heart slammed so hard he felt it in his teeth. "Back!" Jack barked, louder than he meant, then softened instantly. He lifted both hands toward Daisy, palms down, lowering the air again. "Easy, Daisy. Easy. Not a threat." Laura grabbed Cole by the elbow and pulled him away from the gate in one clean motion. Cole protested, but the moment had already turned. Daisy's trunk hovered over the foal like a shield. Then the foal went limp. The crying stopped mid-sound, replaced by a frightening stillness. Megan's face drained of color. She pressed 2 fingers to the foal's neck, then looked up at Jack with the kind of urgency that didn't need words. "We have to start fluids now," she said. "Right here, right now, or we lose it." Jack nodded once, swallowing the panic that wanted to rise. He stepped closer to Daisy's line of sight and spoke like he was speaking to a mother on the edge. "Help her," he murmured. "Let her help." Daisy's trunk touched Jack's shoulder, then slid back to the foal, as if the elephant was making her own decision again, watching, measuring, choosing. Laura's voice stayed low as she guided Cole farther down the road, away from the fence line, away from the sound of the foal's failing breath. "Sir, you're being detained while we verify all of this," she said. Cole's threats faded with distance. In the yard, Megan lifted the IV bag slowly, wrapped in cloth so it wouldn't shine. Jack kept his hands open and his voice steady. The desert morning finally looked like morning. Blue sky, long shadows, birds waking in the scrub. But inside that enclosure, time had narrowed to a single fragile body and the giant heart guarding it. Jack felt the bracelet against his palm and let the weight settle into purpose. One quiet step at a time, he told himself, and stayed right there. The first drip of fluids felt like a gamble made with trembling hands. Megan hung the IV bag from a makeshift hook on the fence rail, cloth wrapped so it wouldn't flash in the sun. Jack stood in Daisy's line of sight, breathing slow, speaking softer than the wind. Daisy's trunk hovered inches from Megan's fingers, not striking, just reading every move. Megan slid the catheter into the foal's vein with precision that looked almost gentle. The foal barely reacted, too far gone for panic, and that frightened Jack more than screaming would have. Daisy rumbled, low and steady, then pressed her cheek against the foal's side, sharing heat like a blanket made of muscle. Jack watched the drip chamber pulse and prayed for time. They built an outdoor ICU out of whatever they could carry. Noah ran for a pop-up shelter and returned at a careful walk, holding poles like they were glass. Riley taped down cords so nothing snapped or slapped. Laura kept Cole down the road, out of sight and sound, her radio whispers swallowed by the desert. The refuge, usually wide and open, tightened into one small circle of quiet. As afternoon turned to evening, the foal's breathing steadied by degrees, still shallow but less jagged. Megan checked gums, heart rate, temperature, then started antibiotics with hands that never shook in front of Daisy. Jack fed Daisy watermelon in small pieces, a trait of trust for patience. Each time Daisy accepted, Jack felt the invisible bridge hold another plank. Night came fast in the desert. The sky cooled from blue to deep violet, and the air dropped hard enough to make Jack's breath visible again. Daisy shifted her body to block the wind, tucking the foal into the warm pocket behind her foreleg. Jack watched her do it, and felt his throat tighten, because it wasn't just instinct. It looked like remembering. Around midnight, thunder rolled from far beyond the ridge, distant but heavy. The first flash of lightning lit the yard in a white blink, and the foal startled, trying to stand on legs. That weren't ready. Daisy reacted instantly, a sharp trumpet that shook the shelter poles. Noah flinched and grabbed the tent frame, and the metal creaked. That creak was enough. Daisy's ears flared wide, and she stepped forward, trunk high, ready to protect. The foal slipped and fell, and Megan froze with both hands up, caught between medicine and survival. Jack felt the yard tip toward disaster, the way it had earlier, but sharper now, because it was dark and the unknown sounded louder. Jack moved without thinking, not toward Daisy's face, but toward the space she'd been taught was safe, low, slow, to the side. He spoke her name like a song he'd sung 100 times. Daisy. Daisy, hey, it's Jack. He kept his palms down, lowering the air again, and he let his voice carry the calm his heart didn't have. Daisy's trunk swung toward him, close enough for Jack to feel warm breath. For a second, he thought she might shove him aside. Instead, the trunk touched his shoulder and stayed there, firm, anchoring herself. Jack didn't move. He stood like a fence post and kept talking, steady, plain, like an old friend in a storm. Slowly, Daisy's ears eased back in. The foal's breathing sped, then caught, then slowed again as Daisy lowered her head and nudged it gently upright. Megan took the opening and rechecked the IV line, fingers careful and small beneath the shadow of Daisy's trunk. Riley signaled Noah to step back from the tent frame. The thunder rolled away, and the yard found its quiet again, shaky but intact. By the second morning, the foal's eyes opened longer, tracking movement instead of drifting through it. It accepted a few sips of warmed formula from a syringe, then leaned into Daisy's leg like it was the only wall that mattered. Jack felt hope rise so sharply it hurt, then forced it down. He'd learned that early optimism could turn into grief fast. On the third day, Megan needed a quick exam away from Daisy's feet, weight check, wound cleaning, a better look at circulation. She lifted the foal only a foot from the ground, keeping it close, and the foal panicked instantly. It screamed, a raw sound, and its legs thrashed toward Daisy as if falling into water. Daisy surged, rumbling hard, and the foal's breath stalled. Megan set it down immediately, hands up, eyes wide. The foal pressed itself against Daisy's leg and shook like it was freezing, even in the sun. Riley's face tightened with recognition. Imprinting, she whispered. Strong. Jack watched Daisy soothe the foal with slow trunk strokes, and the truth settled heavy. Saving its body had changed its mind forever. Jack stepped back and let the scene play out, the way you watch something beautiful you can't control. Daisy stood over the foal, calm again, but watchful, as if separation itself had become the new threat. Jack's fingers touched the bracelet in his pocket, and he felt the old name, Hope, like a bruise and a promise at once. Whatever came next would require more than medicine. Dawn arrived without fog, just a clean Arizona sky and a cool wind off the ridge. Jack Miller hadn't gone home in 3 days. He sat on an overturned bucket by Daisy's fence, coffee gone cold in his hands, watching the zebra foal breathe against her leg. Even the birds seemed to wait before singing. The yard felt quieter now, but the quiet had teeth. Riley Chen met him at the gate with tired eyes and a careful voice. "It's imprinting," she said. "Not a phase. Separation will look like another attack to that foal." She didn't sugarcoat it, and Jack respected her for that. Jack stared at Daisy's scarred forehead, then down at the stripes tucked under her shadow. "So we don't separate," he replied. More decision than sentence. Megan hated agreeing, not because it was wrong, but because it was messy. She listed the risks anyway: diet, space, disease protocols, stress, long-term welfare, the kind of details that kept animals alive after the drama ended. Jack listened, nodding, filing each concern like a tool he'd need later. He'd spent years fixing broken bodies. Now he had to build a life that didn't break minds either. Deputy Laura Price returned with the kind of calm that made Panic feel embarrassed. "Cole's documents are junk," she told Jack. "Wrong serial numbers, fake signatures, and a company that doesn't exist." She kept her voice low, even outside the yard, as if loudness could echo into Daisy's ribs. Jack felt relief flare, then burn into anger. He'd seen too many smooth lies arrive on clean paper. Cole tried one last push, claiming misunderstandings, threatening lawsuits, begging for a phone call. Laura didn't raise her voice. She simply turned him toward the cruiser, read him his rights, and snapped the cuffs closed with a soft click. Jack didn't cheer. He just watched the taillights disappear down the service road and thought about how easily cruelty wore a clean jacket. Noah stood nearby, hands shoved in his pockets, shame and awe fighting on his face. "I saw a trailer by the wash 2 nights ago," he admitted, barely audible. "I thought it was Hunter's." Jack didn't scold him. He placed a hand on the kid's shoulder and kept his eyes on Daisy. "You tell Laura everything," he said. "That's how you help now, and it matters." By afternoon, the refuge's small conference room looked like a war table. Sketches of a new habitat covered the whiteboard. Open run, shaded platforms, a narrow escape lane for the zebra, reinforced barriers for the elephant. Donors called, reporters emailed, and the director worried about headlines. Jack kept it simple. "We don't make this a show," he said. "We make it safe." That night, Jack walked alone to the old maternity stall where Daisy's calf had been born. The door still creaked the same way, and the sound hit him harder than he expected. He pulled the bracelet from his pocket and turned it until the letters caught the light. Hope. Daisy's trunk searching that tiny body flashed back, again and again, and Jack let the tears come, quiet and hot. Back in the yard, Daisy was standing, alert but calm, as if she'd felt his absence. The zebra foal, Zola they'd started calling her, shifted and looked for Daisy's skin like it was home. Jack stepped inside the enclosure with Megan and Riley, moving slowly, carrying nothing but blankets and a promise. Daisy watched, then did something that still felt unreal. She took one step aside, just enough. They guided Zola toward the new space at Daisy's pace, not theirs. Laura kept the perimeter clear. Noah held the gate, hands steady for the first time all week. Zola hesitated on the threshold, ears pinned, breath quick. Daisy rumbled softly and touched Zola's shoulder, and the foal walked forward, as if following a heartbeat. Jack exhaled, like he'd been underwater. Weeks later, the new habitat looked less like a project and more like a place to live. Jack kept visitors back until the routine was real, not fragile. Zola learned the edges, the shade, the raised platform where she could rest without being smothered by love. Daisy learned to give her room, then pull her close when night wind came. From the fence, Jack saw 2 animals choosing calm. On the first evening they settled in, Jack saw Daisy reach toward the rail where he'd hung the hope bracelet on a nail. Her trunk curled around it with a gentleness that made Jack stop breathing. She carried it to Zola and set it in the sand near her nose, then nudged the foal once, like a mother sharing a name, like a blessing without words. Jack didn't tell anyone about that moment at first. He just stood in the dark and listened to the quiet he'd earned back. For once, the job felt gentle, not like a fight. Daisy's body made a shelter. Zola's breathing stayed steady, and in the space between them, Jack understood something he'd never learned in 30 years of rescue work. Some lives are saved twice, once from dying and once from being alone. If this story hit your heart even a little, do me a quick favor. Leave a comment. Type 0 if you believe Daisy saved Zola's life. Type 1 if you think Zola ended up saving Daisy too. I read the comments, and they help these stories reach more people who need them. And if you want more real, emotional rescue stories like this, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.